The Ret Rework is out and it's absolutely insane. So insane that it was already nerfed. And even after the nerf, the spec is still insane. So I'll be going over how to play it now. So in this video, I'm going to be going over the talents, PvP talents, gear and stat pro, burst, and comps. So starting with talents, this is what I'm currently running. I think this is probably the best build for the Paladin side, but there are a couple things you can switch up depending on the matchups. So on the Paladin side, the first thing is I don't think that Vengeful Wrath into the Crusader is even worth going into. So the Crusader, it doesn't actually do that much damage, and Hammer of Wrath doesn't actually do enough damage either, and you don't really have too many opportunities to actually press it because you just have so much bully power now that you can just spam Templars super easy right now. So if you want to try to get Cleanse Toxins, you're going to have to drop something like Short Sack or 1 point into Holy Ages. Both of them are kind of annoying to drop for it, but right now our Paladin side feels very important. Like we need almost everything we have. You could drop Divine Purpose, but I feel like dropping Divine Purpose for Cleanse Toxins isn't really worth it. I don't know, it's just like the average level of all of our things is like way higher than it used to be, so it's a lot harder to drop things on the Paladin side. On to the Ret side, there's quite a bit of variety that you can do. This is kind of just the overall spec that I run a lot of the time. Actually, it's kind of wrong. You don't want to really run Executioner's Will with Final Reck. When you're doing that, you're going to want to go into just your Executioner. But just talking about some things. Final Reck versus Execution Sentence. So Final Reck is good in a lot of situations where you just need like really big burst on your go. But Sentence is better when you can kind of, get pressure outside of your goes. You want that little 30-second go to be more impactful. You can also get it hitting pretty hard. I've hit up to like 160k Execution Sentences even after the nerf. But if you run Final Reck, you're going to want to run kind of just one. You don't really need the increased duration. But if you run Sentence, you definitely want the increased duration so that you can get the biggest hit possible, even though it takes longer to actually pull off. Onto some other things. Crusading Strikes versus Templar Strikes. I think Crusading Strikes is just way better right now. You just don't have the globals to use Templar Strikes. If that changes in the future, it's going to actually be pretty good because it actually does some pretty decent damage. You hit up to 40Ks even with no cooldowns up, so it's pretty nice. But overall, just the base Holy Power generation from Crusading Strikes is just overall better in my opinion, and you just don't have a globals to press Crusading Strikes. That's just all it is. Next up, Final Verdict versus JV. Nowadays, you're pretty much going to want to only use Final Verdict after the JV nerf. The damage you get from it is just not as good now that it's nerfed down to only a 50% increase in stuns, but everything else is pretty standard. Oh, one tip is if you only hit one target with Seething Flame, it's going to hit a lot harder than if you hit multiple targets. There's some weird interaction where even though you're hitting the main target and it's supposed to only drop on secondary targets, it drops on all targets if you're hitting multiple targets with it. So you kind of want to try to use it when people are isolated to get the most value out of Seething Flame. Here's some talents you can drop depending on the situation and what you can get instead of them. One thing you can drop is High Lord's Judgment. It just gives you a little bit more burst on the Empyrean Power Divine Storm. It kind of makes up for the nerf to Inquisitor's Ire that we got, and kind of just makes it so that it does just as much damage, but overall you don't really need it. Another thing you can drop is, you can drop Executioner's Will into most matchups because you're not going to want it when you're playing Final Reck. And then you can also drop Truth's Wake. All these are decent things, but they're not completely necessary. Some other things are kind of just you can drop into certain matchups is Blessed Champions. Blessed Champion makes it so that a lot of your stuff just cleaves, making it kind of hard to not break CC at times. But the damage you get from having it is just so significant that it's kind of hard to miss, and sometimes just risking breaking CC from time to time is kind of worth it. And the other one you can also drop is Expurgation. It doesn't really do too much. It does like 1 to 2% bonus damage, but it's kind of just free consistent damage, so I like running it a lot of the time. And some talents that you can get instead. One is Judge and Executioner. It just gives you a little bit more damage in your burst, because if you can get a crit on your Divine Toll, that can be pretty significant during your goes. You could go Vanguard's Momentum, but most of the time you're not really going to want it because Hammer Wrath doesn't really do too much. You could also go Divine Wrath, just to get a little bit more duration on your wings. And the last thing you could go is Consecrated Blades or Divine Hammers, just if you want a little bit of bonus cleave, but the damage you get from them is really lackluster right now. Like, even in a situation where I'm cleaving the entire game and I have pretty good uptime on Consecrated Blades, it's still only doing like 2% of my damage. It's pretty even with Expurgation, so you can run it if you want to. But those are kind of your options, and that is it for the Retribution talent tree. So now on to PvP talents. So PvP talents were the things that were nerfed the most in the most recent nerf, so it's a lot harder to kind of pick what to go. So right now, I'd say our 3 best talents are Vengeance Aura, Judgment of the Pure, and Blessing of Sanctuary. Vengeance Aura is the only thing that actually gives us a significant increase in damage, because when you crit, you're still going to be doing some really big damage, and this makes it more likely for you to crit. Judgment of the Pure is absolutely insane right now. It just shits on a ton of different dot cleaves and also a bunch of like CC comps. Against Shadow Priests, you just spam dispel their dots. Against Hunters, you can just get the trap super easily, especially now that you have 3 tries with double Judgment and Divine Toll. It's just a really, really strong ability, and I'm 99% sure it's going to get nerfed soon, so abuse it while you can. And then the last one is Blessing of Sanctuary. You know, it's just the same thing as been for 4 expansions now, I think. Gets an ally out of CC, 45-second cooldown. It's just really nice to have, especially when you pair it with Judgment of the Pure. You just get your team out of so much CC that it's just really broken. But other than these, in a situation where you can't run Judgment of the Pure, like into things like Aflocks, you can go into Blessing of Spell Warding, just another cooldown for you to have into Magic teams. It's pretty good into Double Caster, just gives you an extra button since Bop is kind of useless. Other than that, it's kind of hard. You can't run Aura of Reckoning right now because they said they fixed it, but it does not work with Crusading Strikes. If you're playing something that you just need a little bit more mobility into, you can play Hallowed Grounds, just gives you a Emancipation whenever you use Consecration. It's not as good as it used to be because Consecration is such a longer cooldown than it was before, but if you use it with Consecrated Blades, it's back down to the 10-second cooldown, but it's kind of hard to kind of use it when exactly you need it. Lawbringer can kind of be used, but it's really bad damage, and same with Luminescence, but you know, sometimes just 2% bonus damage is all you need. It's just kind of all we have left with our PvP talents. Our PvP talents are very lackluster now, except for these 3 are very powerful. In situations where you can't run them, you're kind of SOL. And that is it for PvP talents. So now let's talk about my gear and stat priority. So my gear is a bit different from a lot of other Rets. I don't like to run the crafted helm. I prefer the tier helm, and instead dropping my tier pants for the mastery pants. But for the most part, all of your secondary stat pieces are going to be mastery, 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 and then your ring is going to be mastery and haste. And then for trinkets for human, you're going to want to go on use and proc. But again, some things you could opt into BM because it is pretty good at keeping you alive, but a lot of times it feels like you are not the kill target anymore, so just opting in for the most damage possible is kind of just the best bet in my opinion. As for gems, you can either go Verse Mastery or Haste Mastery, with Mastery being the major in my opinion. You don't really need too much Verse because, as I said, you're pretty tanky right now, so I like to go Mastery into Haste. This makes it so my global spell a lot cleaner, and also I get a lot more damage from the Mastery. As for enchants, I am going haste because I don't really feel like I need as much bonus mastery anymore, and having the haste kind of just feels kind of nice. I haven't actually really tested with it, so if you prefer to go verse or mastery, you can, but it's just my personal preference. And then for cloak and wrist enchants, you can either go speed or leech. I personally prefer leech because it lets me kite other paladins and other things with similar move speed to me a bit easier, and also I just don't think the leech is that good. It gives you maybe like 100 or 200k healing in a like 4-minute game. And then weapon enchant is Sophic. Next up, here's how you set up your burst. So a lot of it is situational. If you have 5 holy power ready, I tend to just pop wings, send JV into final Reck, JV, wake, JV, toll. If you don't have holy power or want the highest burst in the shortest amount of time, you're gonna hodge, pop wings, final Reck, JV, wake, JV, toll, JV. Then, lastly, for the highest burst possible, you want to stack up Divine Arbiter, then also get to 2 stacks of Blessing of Dawn. After all that, you judge, hodge, press wings plus on-use trinket, final Reck, JV. A lot of time this is all it takes to kill, but if not, you can wake into JV, into toll, into JV. This is generally how you get the max burst possible, but for the most part, you can just pull off burst super easily whenever you have a Divine Storm proc and Divine Arbiter fully stacked. You can get someone to half their health instantly without even having cooldowns up. And now onto the last part. Your best comps for 3v3 are going to be Ret Hunter, Ret Warrior, and Ret Demo. But honestly, right now you can play literally any comp of the game with Ret. I've seen Ret Boomies, Ret DHs, double Rets, all those things over like 2700 MMR. You can play pretty much anything. Oh, also Ret Rogue, Ret Windwalker. It's just everywhere. You can play anything with Ret and probably do well. But your best comps are probably going to be Ret Warrior, Ret Hunter, and Ret Demo. Best healers for those comps are going to be, for Ret Warrior and Ret Demo, it's going to be Resto Druid or Resto Shaman. For Ret Hunter, it's going to be Resto Shaman or Disc Priest, but Archer can still work. And yeah, that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.